Great. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Hopefully you're here for the Navigating the Design Manufacturing Journey and not for the How to Do Pot Plants in Lockdown series. So this is a series the KTN has been running now for I think 11 weeks. And today what we're going to be talking about is networking and collaborating. This is a series we're doing in partnership with Technology Scotland. I'll be passing over to my co-host Ali in a minute. I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction to what we're talking about today and a bit about what I'm doing within the KTN. So I'm in the Enabling Technologies team here, and we're all about electronics, sensors, photonics, those things that help you do and achieve. So there's often a role played in manufacturing for help in sensing, for manufacturing, sometimes with product design, delivery, prototyping. And I think for those that have been to these events before, you'll have heard this message, but it's worth saying again, especially for the new people. Doing stuff is really difficult. And the majority of businesses, especially in the hardware space, they fail. It is not an easy thing to do. It is a very complex process. And this webinar series has been talking about many of those elements. Today's is a piece that is some view as a bit of a dark art, and it's that whole, the people skills of networking, collaborating, and what they can achieve. So if I skip on to the next slide. Part of that is how you can actually meet people, especially in COVID lockdown world. And we have a wonderful tool for that called Meeting Mojo. That's been open across the whole series of events. If you haven't signed up for it yet, you have not missed out on the opportunity. It is still live. And this allows you to network, collaborate, and chat in a private space. So you're not sharing the world and life, the secrets you have. And you can sign up to it by dropping us a message either through the chat or through email, and we can sign you up and talk to delegates from other events. If you have signed up for it, you should have had some emails. If someone wants to meet you, do check your spam folder if you've had nothing and you thought you should have something. But it's a really good collaborative tool, especially now when it's a bit harder to pop out and get a coffee and have a chat with someone. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass you over to Ali from Technology Scotland, who we've been working with in this series, and he's going to tell you about the programme for today's event.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. It's good to be hosting with you today.
Ali.
Hello, apologies. I got to week 11 before that happened. Can you believe it? Anyway, apologies. Thanks, Simon, is what I was saying. Pleasure to be co-hosting with you today. I'd just like to briefly add my welcome to that of Simon's. My name's Ali McInroy. I'm the Chief Exec at Technology Scotland. We're the industry association for Scotland's enabling technology sector, and among other things, we also run the Product Design Scotland Network, which is the hat that I'll be wearing today in terms of today's session. As I mentioned, this is actually my 11th and final week hosting on this series. I can't make next week, unfortunately. Well, not that unfortunate. I'm on holiday, whatever that means these days. I'm not quite sure. But I've thoroughly enjoyed being part of the series so far. And it gives me just quickly an opportunity to thank all of the KTN who have helped to pull this together, but particularly to Abby Hurd, who has my co-host for the majority of this session and has been driving most of the organisation behind the scenes. So a big thank you to Abby and to all of you for your support over the last 3 months. But on to today's session, and it's a topic that's very close to our hearts because it's something that we have a big focus on as an industry association, as you'd expect, and that's around networking and collaboration. And today we're joined by 3 excellent speakers to guide us through that, Danny, Roland and Alex. And we'll be hearing from them in just a second, and I'll chair that, and I'll also facilitate the Q&A that we'll run directly after the 3 presentations. So we'll run the 3 presentations back to back, and then we'll have a joint Q&A session at the end. Just a couple of housekeeping rules before we do that. We encourage you to submit questions at any time during the presentations. You can do so, as Anita mentioned, using the Q&A functionality, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. Please do use the Q&A functionality for your questions and not the chat functionality. We reserve the chat function for all sorts of other things, and inevitably questions can get lost in the thread if you do that. So please put them in the Q&A. It also helps us a lot when you submit a question if you could identify somewhere within your question which one of our panelists you're directing that question at. If there is not a particular panelist, then that's fine. Please do submit your questions and I'll pick on somebody at the end. Okay, I think that is enough of preamble and housekeeping. So I'd like to now introduce you to our first speaker, who is Danny Kane at Filament PD, who are a member of Product Design Scotland. So delighted to have Danny with us today. So Danny, over to you.
Thanks, Ali. Just share my screen. Hi everyone. I'm Danny Kane. I'm the co-founder and design director of Filament. And over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through what collaboration means to us and some of the key lessons we've learned throughout the years. So yeah, we're a Glasgow-based product design and development agency, and we specialise in the development of IoT and connected hardware devices. So for those of you who don't know, an Internet of Things or an IoT device is a physical product that connects to the internet to transmit data. So pretty soon that's going to be most things, whether we like it or not, and some more useful than others. And there's already an estimated 50 billion connected devices in the world. So over the years, we've worked with many companies from ambitious startups all the way through to global brands. We've worked across diverse sectors with very different cultures and ways of working, some quite traditional and resistant to change, while others extremely fast moving and embracing new ideas easily. And over this past 7 years, we've helped develop and successfully launch over 100 products. So these include some weird and wonderful things, from gourmet coffee vending machines to truly autonomous lawnmowers to anti-counterfeit banknote scanners, smart building sensors, wearable vital signs monitors, solar thermal collectors, immersive aircraft simulators, GPS, sports trackers, to smart health and safety solutions. So quite an eclectic bunch. So over the process of those projects, we've learned that collaboration is really core to everything we do, and it would be impossible for us to deliver projects without it. And we're looking at ways we can continuously improve how we collaborate, and it's every bit as important to us as expanding our knowledge and skills in design, engineering and technology. As I've said, I think it's fair to say that collaboration is absolutely critical in any product development. But that's especially true for connected devices. Bringing together the complexity of all of these disciplines across multiple organizations isn't easy, and it's very unusual for one organization to have all of these skills and disciplines in-house. So our value comes as much from a sort of our human-centered holistic view of the product development process and helping our clients navigate this, as it does from delivering design and engineering services. So hence this sort of product design connected mantra that we have all about our branding and touch points. So collaboration, even from the outset of Filament, was one of our core values. So the name Filament was inspired by Thomas Edison's most favorite innovation. So not actually the light bulb itself, but the filament that enabled the first commercially viable light bulb because it lasted long enough. So he held over 1,000 patents, but to me, arguably the most important invention was the modern day interdisciplinary R&D lab. So he opened this invention factory at Menlo Park in New Jersey in 1876. And a real team approach for design and innovation was unheard of. And the conventional wisdom that ideas came from lone geniuses. So after seeing how successful Edison's approach was, other industrialists started to open their own innovation factories, and that became the norm. And that, to this day, has enabled some of the greatest technological advances of the 20th century, including transistor, the laser, solar cell, personal computer, internet, to name a few. So I still think the recipe for successful creative collaboration has remained pretty much unchanged since Edison's day. I think you need three things. You need to create the right culture, the right structure, and the right environment for it to thrive. So hopefully over the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to go through a few learnings that we've come across over the projects we worked on. So first of all, culture. And this isn't something you can wake up on a Monday morning and say, I'm suddenly going to have a collaborative culture. It's something that has to be built from the ground up. And it's something that has to permeate every corner of your organization. Leaders can't simply tell people just to collaborate, otherwise it's just an empty cliche. We've got to walk the walk. And the most rewarding projects we've worked on is when we've had kind of genuine buy-in from all levels. It's also a flat hierarchy also really helps. Otherwise you get trapped by the best ideas coming from the superiors rather than the truly creative ones. So we try to make sure that that everyone gets their say and is empowered to take ownership of their area of the project. Another one is clearly defining sort of ground rules and not losing focus on the expected outcome. And when we start a project, we like to make sure we've got all the stakeholders on the table and really understand the vision and what we're trying to achieve, and then divide up the roles and responsibilities before we begin. And if we can't fill out the sheet with what everyone's responsibilities are, from our client side, internally at Filament, and from the key suppliers, and as far as possible, we always like to have representation from end users, because that's an extremely valuable part of human-centered design. And if we can't fill those in, then we generally won't start the project. And finally, you really need to have trust. You have to assume the best in people. It can sometimes be hard when you've been burned or jaded from past experience, but it's really impossible to build a collaborative culture with skepticism. So you have to approach every project with optimism and an open mind, and actually listen to people and build on their ideas instead of shooting them down. The other thing is really important is to forget competitiveness, and you probably wonder why there's a picture of some chickens. But Purdue University in Indiana conducted a study a few years ago where they looked into the behavior of chickens and egg production. And they found that those two sort of main groups of chickens are a mostly collaborative bunch who got together and were fairly nice to each other. And then you had the star performer chickens who were more aggressive but laid the most eggs. So what the researchers did is they bred the star performers and they bred the collaborative chickens over 5 generations for a year. And they had some surprising results that the collaborative bunch actually outperformed the star performers in egg production by 260%. And this is because the star performers actually became stars, not by being great, but by suppressing others. So they'd literally peck other chickens into submission. So I think that's something we can learn from human organizations as well, that relationships have to be built on a mutual respect and not a competitive spirit. And that internally competitive teams are actually far less productive. So moving on to structure, creative collaboration absolutely needs structure. It needs to have a clear methodology. When we work with small companies, we've frequently noticed that this kind of freedom to operate inevitably leads to a bit of chaos and unpredictability. And on the other hand, larger organizations remain tied up in sort of internal budgets and payment procedures and governance workflows. So the truth is that the sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. Collaboration thrives where there's an openness to embrace new practices and thinking, but also where there are some rules and some leaders. So the key is to create what we call a flexible framework rather than a sort of rigid tick box process. We imagine being part of a football team and you don't know the rules and someone passes you a ball and they're screaming at you, and just because you don't know what to do. So you can't help your team to win without this framework. So pretty much every design company in the world has their own version of their process, and this is ours from the 4 Ds, from discover through design, deliver, and deploy. So for ease, it's obviously shown as a linear process, but in real life, it's very iterative and bounces back and forward beyond these. But what it gives internally, our clients, our suppliers, is a sort of shared vocabulary that everyone knows what the direction of the project and where they are on that project. And that allows people to be more creative instead of arguing over the sort of fundamentals. And it helps to communicate through all the touch points. So we have this emblazoned everywhere from our office wall to every proposal goes out to every presentation we send to customers. And it really helps for that kind of shared vision of where the project's going. Of course, the right talent has to meet the right tools. And we are pretty lucky with the vast array of digital collaboration tools available. Back in Edison's time, it could take days, even weeks to share a sketch with someone out with the town or the building you're in. And having these digital tools is essential to collaborate workflows, for collaborative workflows. It allows us to share ideas instantaneously and really often with everyone, which is an incredibly important part of the collaborative process. But I think we've also got to be quite careful of this. Just because it helps you streamline, a tool helps you streamline the process, doesn't make you an expert. And you should really ask yourself why are you using a particular platform before you go all in it. So over on the right hand side, you can see some of the tools we use at Filament, and each of these will be given careful consideration to make sure that they don't overlap too much with one another. So for instance, Fusion 360, our CAD package, Monday we use for project management, Mural for online collaboration, Google Meet for obvious reasons at the moment. So we thoroughly test these in-house and make sure they actually work for us before rolling them out to the team. And I think in the kind of digital age, sort of FaceTime, I don't mean the Apple video chat app. I mean actually being in the same room as people. It still can't be underestimated. And certainly over the last few months, well, we've worked very effectively remotely. It is quite hard to replicate that sort of buzz you get from being in the same room as other collaborators. So I think going forward in the digital age, there's still room for a good old face-to-face meeting. And finally, onto environment. So creating the right environment can really help collaboration flourish, and it also reinforces the culture and the structure we've talked about. So that's a picture of our studio in one of our last networking events, and it kind of makes me slightly nervous looking at a picture with so many people in it. This is Menlo Park, Edison's idea factory in the late 19th century. At the time, this was a revolution. On the bottom floor, we had office space, and above it was a machine shop and a chemistry lab. And that allowed people from different disciplines to meet together in the same space and spark innovation. So when we moved to studio last year, we still think this rings true, and we looked for that in a new space. So this is our sort of new studio, and I think the picture was taken just the week we moved in. We look for somewhere with high ceilings, a sense of space, big windows, plenty of natural light, and how we could break it into different zones that were private and also collaborative and allowed to create like physical base camps for projects, which really helps teams get immersed in it. So we're really keen to create an inspiring space for our team, and also a place where other companies we were working with and our customers could come in and really feel part of the process. I think another really important part is not just the studio, but again, taking a leaf out of Edison's book, we've got a 2,500 square foot workshop, which is directly adjacent to our studio. And that really enables sort of spontaneity and the collaborative process. So if a team comes up with an idea, we can quickly go into the workshop, use the digital prototyping tools there to knock something together to then move the project forward very efficiently. So I think, again, when you're looking at a space, whether you're designing an app or a physical product, I think it's really important to surround your team with the right tools that they can push it forward and help them collaborate. And beyond the sort of physical office space that you create for your people, you've got to think about how you engage the wider network, and obviously that's part of why we're here today. So locally in Glasgow, we found there was a bit of a gap. We work in the space where sort of creativity meets technology, and we didn't think there was a network that quite brought those two fields together. So following a trade trip to Silicon Swally a couple of years ago, we had an idea and we pitched it to Creative Scotland and got some lottery funding to set up Silicon Swally. So for the non-Scots amongst us, Swally is a colloquial term for an alcoholic beverage. So we love a good pun, and we'd been sitting in the name for years. So this gave us a good excuse to use it. So it's a not-for-profit project. It's got no agenda other than getting interesting people in the same room, some good speakers, plying them with good beer and good pizza, and hoping to create opportunities for some great collaborative projects. So we've had a couple of them before it was rudely interrupted by COVID crisis. They've been really successful, and we're hoping to be back in some socially distanced skies in the autumn. But again, I think this, if it's something doesn't exist, then go out and find ways to engage with your network and expand your reach. So to sum up, today creative collaborative environments have many different looks, and they include remote workers, but I think Edison's basic idea of gathering smart, motivated people together in the same space, either physically or digitally, to work through problems and ideas together, and eventually something that's ultimately more than the sum of its parts. So, thanks very much, and I'll hand over to Roland.
Many thanks, Danny. That's great. And as a previous participant of Silicon Swally, I can tell you that that is the perfect networking environment for any Scot, at least, and I suspect probably most others. I'd also like to congratulate you on the chicken analogy, which I think is almost certainly the best analogy we've had in this entire series so far. Well done on that one as well. So thanks to Danny. We're going to move on now to Roland. Just before we do, just a wee reminder that you can submit your questions to the Q&A at any time in the session. And also, I'll draw your attention to the chat functionality as well. There's lots of interesting links and information that's posted in there too. So you may want to take some time just to read through those threads as well. But in the meantime, over to you, Roland.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Danny. Thanks, everyone. Good to be here today. So I'm Roland Harwood. I'm in London today. I am half Scottish, half American, half German, and a bit of a hybrid. But I want to build on a couple of things that both Danny and Simon. So Simon started out, if you were here at the beginning, describing networking as a dark art, which I think often it is thought of as such. But hopefully through this session today, we can rectify that perception a little bit. And I also really like, Danny, what you said just towards the end there, that if you think something doesn't exist, go out to your network. Because if I can just add to what you said there, I think let me just go back a second. I think 99.9% of any problem that you can articulate, the solution already exists out there somewhere. There are times when you need to be kind of Edison and invent something brand new, but that most of the time, at least part, if not all of the solution to virtually any problem you can articulate exists out there. So fundamentally, I think the challenge of innovation, design, engineering in the 21st century is around building connections, is around networking, is around being a good detective and finding opportunities, as well as, of course, the more classic skills of creativity and engineering and design, etc., which I think many people on the session are expert in. So yeah, I am describing myself as a compulsive connector, which is just a short way of saying I wear many hats. And I'll post in the chat at the end links to some of the things I'm going to talk about and some of the things I'm affiliated with. The main thing I want to kind of frame my talk about today is called Liminal, which is we describe ourselves as a collective intelligence community. I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. Focused, but yeah, what that means is we're a group of creative and entrepreneurial people who are interested in solving hard problems. And if you're interested, I can share details, and it'd be wonderful to chat to anybody who wants to find out more. But I am also, on a part-time basis, European Managing Director for a very interesting Canadian company called Iovia that works with the likes of Lego, IKEA, Unilever on building some online brand communities, one of which I was going to share briefly, and also involved in a bunch of other things, which I'll share links to because I probably don't have time to go through them all today. So yeah, liminal is a word which you may not know, but more people are familiar with the term subliminal, so kind of subliminal thoughts. Liminal just means kind of the threshold or the boundary between the subliminal and the liminal. And so it's a transition or a sort of edge. And for me, it's an interesting word to describe kind of where we are in the world right now. I think the current COVID crisis is a kind of liminal state. We're sort of in transition, not knowing exactly where we're going. I also think most of the best ideas and opportunities come from the unexpected edges or fringes of organizations and places. And so for me, I've always been fascinated by this concept of liminality and looking sort of at the edges. In the words of Kurt Vonnegut, who some of you might know, American author, he said, out on the edges, you can see all kinds of things that you can't see from the center. So whenever I work in places or with organizations, I'm always keen to try and build community, build connections out on the fringes and beyond the fringes to see, because that's where kind of good ideas come from. Generally, tightly knit communities recycle the same information. And so there's not too much kind of new idea kind of sharing between sort of tight-knit communities, and there's a lot of evidence, and I can point people to research on this if you're interested, to show that new ideas come usually from your kind of second and third degree connections in your network. And so increasingly we have the tools and the demand and the need to kind of access those ideas that come slightly from left field, if you will, within our respective networks. So just quickly, just to go back to Liminal, which is the kind of hat I am wearing to speak with you today. We are a network of currently about 85 people. Last time I checked, about half of whom are in the UK and half of whom are overseas. Here's a few, this is a slightly out of date slide. There's quite a few new faces on here that need to be added. They're a mixture of creative and entrepreneurial people who come together to work on interesting projects that fall between the cracks. We try and tackle projects, particularly with a focus around sustainability and equality, working primarily with kind of not-for-profit organizations, but I'm going to talk about a few kind of corporate and for-profit ones as well. And I think the most interesting kind of challenges to address these days are those that don't sit within the remit of any single organization and institution. I think the most important problems to solve right now and in the future are those that involve often quite unusual hybrids of people and organizations coming together to figure out how they work together practically, technically, regulatory, culturally. And so this is the space that we're trying to, the in-between space, the liminal space that we're trying to occupy through the work that we do. So have a look at the link on the page if you want to find out a bit more about those people. And really this kind of community came about because I'm the ripe old age of 46 now, and a bit like Danny with his network in Glasgow, I felt there wasn't anything quite like this that I wanted to be part of. So I thought, well, let's kind of create it ourselves. In the words of a woman called June Jordan, who's a very interesting writer from New York, she said, we are the ones we have been waiting for. So rather than waiting for somebody else to do it, we decided to do it for ourselves. So I think that's a good principle in all kinds of different contexts. So to try and put a bit of kind of maths and kind of science to the dark art, as Simon described it, of networking, I thought I'd just kind of put this chart on the screen, which are probably familiar to some of you, but maybe not all of you. So if I just kind of talk you through what is shown here on the screen right now. So if you imagine the little white dots are people and the red lines are connections between people, if you have 3 people, you have 3 different possible pairings that you can create. But when you have 10 people, that grows to 45 pairs. And when you have 30 people, that grows to 435 pairs. And last time I checked, we had 57 people on this session. Oh, it's grown to 63. Okay, so I don't have quite the right calculation. But when we had 57 people about 5 minutes ago, we have 1,596 pairs, and that number will be higher now. So if we wanted to, we could have an excruciating speed network Zoom session where we get to talk to tons of different people, but I'm not suggesting we do that. But the reason I share this chart is because it illustrates quite nicely, I think, the biggest kind of mental hurdle that we need to get over when it comes to networking. Namely, most people, and I include myself in this, by the way, tend to think linearly when it comes to kind of connectivity and networks. So the sort of intuition that most people have around something like this is when you double the number of people in a room, you sort of double the number of connections and possibilities. But actually that's not true, as this chart shows. And hopefully as the data that I've just shown, I've sort of talked about shows, the sort of connectivity increases sort of exponentially. It's actually a geometric progression for any kind of mathematicians in the room. But anyway, to all intents and purposes, it's an exponential growth of connectivity. And so what this means, this leads to sort of quirky phenomenon, like the fact that you need just 23 people in a room for it to be likely that 2 people share a birthday. So I guarantee you on today's session, we have lots of people who share a birthday without necessarily even knowing it. But more interestingly than that, what else do we share in terms of common professional interests or personal interests or contacts that we have in common, and we just don't even realize it yet. This kind of potential within a room full of people or a Zoom call full of people has always been true. But what hasn't always been true is having the tools and the methods and the networks to sort of visualize some of this connectivity far more easily than ever before. And so I feel very passionately, and I'll give some examples of sort of organizations and projects that are trying to harness this in a moment, that to be competitive globally, after all, we're all in a global marketplace, we need to be harnessing those kind of hidden connections, and so visualizing them is step one, and then figuring out what we do about that and making those connections as a result. So so let me give you a few examples of that. That fundamentally, innovation is a byproduct of engaged communities and networks of people, and so it's not something that can be manufactured. I think it's as an art as well as a science, but it is a sort of happy accident and a happy byproduct of Silicon Valley or whatever it might be in terms of the communities that you're part of, or today's session as well. So I'm just going to rattle through 5 quick examples. I'm not going to spend very long on any of them because we don't have time, but if anyone's interested in any of these, chat to me afterwards, or I'll share the links as well. So firstly, very much on a product basis, some of you might be familiar. Simon, if you were paying attention, had a few Lego sets behind him on his webcam earlier. I'm very proud to have played a small role in helping create the Lego Ideas community almost 10 years ago now. It's now 10 years later, about 1 million or so people coming up with ideas for Lego products. The community has to kind of get behind them. So you need 10,000 people to support your idea before Lego will take it seriously. It then enters a review process, and then as it stands at the moment, Lego produces 4 products a year. Here's a couple of them from recent years. Female scientists immortalized in Lego on the left, and Lego Minecraft brought to life through Lego on the right. They share 1% of the revenue with these new products with the creators, and every single one of these products sells out. So for a company like Lego, where 60% of their product range is new every year, so the rate of innovation is very high, and the risk of innovation is that something won't sell, finding a community that creates best-selling Lego products is very, commercially successful for a company like Lego. But also the community comes up with stuff that frankly Lego would never think of because they're in their own kind of bubble, and they're essentially marketing product concepts before they're doing the expensive bit, which is manufacturing them, which is usually the other way around to most manufacturing-based companies, who usually focus on manufacturing the product and then think about how to market it second. So I think there's lots to learn from examples like that. I could talk about that all day, but I won't. I'm going to skip over this one. This is a global startup challenge for UBS. It's not product focused, but it's very kind of community focused. Lots of opportunity for connecting corporates and startups, which I can talk about. This is another one of those more product orientated. So this was a series of challenges we ran for Ford Motor Company in 8 different cities in North America a couple of years ago. All around finding kind of local needs and local solutions around the future of transport and mobility. Lovely project. I won't say any more on that, but I'll share the links. Now going into some of the more recent kind of liminal stuff. This is a playbook that we developed for the United Nations and Nesta, all around the idea of collective intelligence, which we define simply as human intelligence and machine intelligence sort of combined. And that is not a static thing. That's a constant merry dance between the capabilities of technology and the capabilities of people playing to each other's strengths. I think it was Picasso who famously said that humans are good at what computers are bad at, and vice versa. And so collective intelligence is kind of the term that tries to solve hard problems by combining human and machine capabilities. We produce this playbook. It's free to download. If you look at the link at the bottom left, you can get it. It's a 200+ page PDF document with a whole bunch of worksheets and guides and case studies and cards and a bit of kind of theory and background in there as well, and focused all around tackling the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So these are big, hairy, global challenges, but using kind of the combination of collective intelligence to tackle those. So that might be of interest to some people on this call. I'm going to keep on going. More recently, we've done a lot of work, including in Glasgow, around cities getting to carbon neutral, net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050. The date varies depending on where you're looking. And this was a report, I'll share the link, that people can access, that show the journeys that some cities are on. Of course, Glasgow will be hosting COP26 now next year rather than later this year as originally planned because of COVID, which is a great opportunity to sort of catalyze innovation in that space. And I'm personally very kind of motivated and sort of excited about the opportunity to use the COVID crisis to reinvent our manufacturing systems and economy more broadly to be far more sustainable. And so if you're interested in some of that and the city perspective on that, then have a look at the work we've done in that space. Lastly, this is a new project that we're just launching in a couple of weeks' time called Scaling Out for Impact. This is a partnership between United Kingdom and South Africa, funded by an organization called the Newton Fund, which is basically international aid money, and it's around tackling global inequality. South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, economically speaking, based on various kind of reports and measures that you care to look at. And we're matching UK-based innovators and entrepreneurs with South African innovators and entrepreneurs based in townships and rural areas to really try and make the commercial case as well as the kind of social case for working with low-income communities. So there's a term that some of you might be familiar with, which is the largest socioeconomic group in the world are called people sometimes called living at the base of the pyramid. And it's a huge commercial opportunity, but generally is ignored by kind of companies. And it's largely kind of dealt with and tackled by non-government organizations or government organizations and charities. And I'm not wishing to downplay the importance of that not-for-profit kind of agencies and organizations kind of focused on those communities. I think there is a great need and opportunity for kind of commercial investment to flow into this space as well. So that's what we're trying to tackle here. If you're interested in that, let me know. I'm happy to talk further about that. So I'm gonna wrap up in just a second. I'm gonna give you a quick little kind of playful exercise that you might want to try with your teams or colleagues after today. But fundamentally, I think when it comes to any kind of cooperation or collaboration, you want the best of all possible, both, you know, if two people are connecting or two organizations are connecting, you want the best of both worlds rather than sort of diluting and getting the worst of all possible worlds. So the way to do that is to connect maybe where you have something in common, like a birthday or a shared interest, but benefit from your differences. Diversity and difference is really, really crucial and mustn't be underplayed. And there's a whole bunch of methods and tools in the playbook that I shared that can help you ensure that you maintain that cognitive diversity and that sort of different capabilities to create something new and better, and 1 + 1 = 3 and all of those kind of cliches, but are there for a reason. They're cliches for a reason. The little playful exercise that you can maybe try afterwards is this. This is based on some work out of Liverpool University on something called the knowledge illusion, which basically just illustrates that we know far less than we think we know. So if you think about a humble object like the bicycle, here's a little kind of beginnings of a sketch of a bicycle on the screen. If you want to, if I was in a workshop setting, I'd encourage you to copy this and complete the sketch. Add the chains and the pedals and the frame, whatever's missing. Generally, just to cut to the chase, because we don't have time to spend longer on this, when you do this with people, most people get this completely wrong. They think they know how a bicycle works, but then they draw pictures like this, which if you look at it, these are all kind of physically impossible. The pedals are floating in midair on the top right-hand image. In all of these cases, the chains are connecting the front and back wheel, which I'm sure many of you will realize wouldn't actually function as a bicycle. And what is going on, I think, here is most people outsource their knowledge about bicycles to other people because it's not important information. The average brain only holds between kind of 1 and 40 gigabytes, depending on which kind of neuroscience research you believe. And we outsource the rest to other people, or increasingly, of course, the internet as well. So I think what's important, summing up, when it comes to networking and collaboration, is to be humble about what we know, and more importantly about what we don't know. Every single person you'll ever meet knows something you don't, and so paying attention is the best thing that you can do, the rarest and purest form of generosity, in the words of Simone Weil. So my number one lesson learned around networking and connectivity is simply to try and be generous and to pay attention and to listen. It's remarkable what you can find out if you sort of approach it in that way. So my final kind of call to action really, and by all means stick this in the chat or the Q&A, but with 50 or 60 people on this call, I'm pretty sure that we could all help each other get to people or organizations that can really help each other out. We are, I'm sure many of you are familiar with this idea of 6 degrees of separation. According to some work done at Facebook a few years ago, actually, the world is more like 3.5 degrees of separation these days. We're so connected. So what that means is pretty much within a couple of degrees, we can get to virtually anyone. I've done this many times in kind of workshops, and it's really quite remarkable how we can help each other out if only we ask the question. So try and be specific. If anyone feels like being bold and posting this in the chat or the Q&A, then by all means do it, and we'll see if anybody else can help them. But try and be specific about who you want to get to, both a named individual or a role within a named organization perhaps, and perhaps explain a little bit about why you want to get to them. And then let's see if we can help each other out and connect the dots a little bit. And it's easier than you think, but it does require, I think, a different mindset and a different way of working. So I think that's everything I was going to share. I'm conscious that I've covered a lot of ground. I'm going to post a bunch of links in the chat in just a second, and you can follow up on some of those. But I'll just hand back over to Ali, I think, to take us to the next session. Thank you.
Okay, cheers. Thank you, Roland, for that. Just before we move on to our final speaker, Alex, just a reminder that you can submit questions at any time. You're very quiet in the questions today, folks, at home. Come on, I know it's a nice day and lunch is beckoning, but you need to pull the finger out a little bit, otherwise you'll be subjected to my own questions, which are never as interesting as our audience questions. So now on to our final speaker, who is Alex Stewart. And Alex is taking the very brave decision not to use slides, which some may welcome wholeheartedly at home. But I'll pass on to you now, Alex.
Hello. Thanks very much, Ali. So I'm the only non-Scot in the panel, despite the name, which is Alex Stewart. Anyway, I do have some Scottish blood, but not as much as the others have claimed. But it's great to be on the Zoom call, and this is the first time that I've actually done a public introduction to the Bessemer Society. So probably many of you, or most of you I should say, have never heard of us. This isn't by design so much as, I suppose, the nature of our beast, which is that we're a personal network, we're not digital. So I'm living up to this by not using any digital tools besides Zoom, which I'm forced to use. We're a face-to-face group, and it's defined by the fact you're a CEO or a founder of a hard tech company. By hard tech, we mean manufacturing-oriented, IP-based proprietary technology that can be manufactured. We have just over 100 members. We've been running for 5 years now, so we're finally getting this valuable public platform to say a little bit more about us openly. The restrictions are there in terms of membership, but once a CEO or founder is a member, if they fit the entrepreneurial criteria, they can always substitute and send somebody else to our dinners. We operate as a dinner forum. We have speakers, 3 speakers per dinner, almost always pretty high class. I mean, they're always high class in my view, but they may be well known in many cases, figures. We've been fortunate to get from government or senior industry, finance and so on. And the purpose of the dinners is to discuss a topic that's relevant to the hard tech community, of which most or all of you are involved in. Topics are typically, obviously, well not obviously, but should be obvious, perhaps finance, funding, it's always high on the list. It could be government issues, can be supply chain, proprietary protection of assets, getting into foreign markets, working with foreign entities and learning how to get into China, America, work with Germans, and so on and so forth. But the real end we have is to bring people together physically. So I can understand, what's it, Valley Swally, Silicon Swally, fabulous name. We like playing around as well and having slightly tongue-in-cheek to make our events extremely friendly, and as a result, people will talk, get to know each other, and as Roland said, I don't know the mathematics of it, but if you have a X number of people, as he said, even a dinner will have 30 to 50 people, then it's a short phone call. Maybe one phone call only would be necessary to find somebody, as you say. So networking can be extremely valuable through such a close-knit group. How did it come about, you may ask? How would one dream this up? Well, I shouldn't say dream it up. First, when we started this 5 years ago, we thought, oh, there's probably something like this, but anyway, let's just see if it's got legs. And a group of CEOs that I knew, we came together and we talked it through, and we discovered that firstly, no one could think of anything that covered the bases that we cover. And they all agreed it was very useful. I also did a survey of about 50 people in my network, and we only had one slightly negative response, which surprised me. So we decided to go for it. And I think we've been very effective in two ways. One is simply in building up an influence network with the kind of speakers who come. They come because they know they're going to meet fairly senior people in the hard tech industry, 30 to 50, as I say, might be at a dinner forum. And so that's very valuable. And the second thing is that as soon as you get over a certain number, and as soon as we had 30 members, we already thought we were quite influential. But when you're 100, you don't need to actually be a huge number. If you're fairly tight-knit, you do have more influence. I didn't realize that until we've been moving along with this thing. So we can talk to government, or government can come and ask us, what does your community think? And with the COVID-19 and all the efforts government's making to help different communities, including the high-tech and innovation one, then we've had a lot of back and forward with government agencies, Innovate UK in particular, but others. And we've added, I think, quite a lot of value to our community, and hopefully to the government people, or at least they've heard us. And I suppose a couple of examples, finally, in the interest of time, where we can give examples of where there have been direct benefits for members. One that happens from time to time is they're meeting people they never met before, didn't even know about their company, discover they've got quite a lot in common. It may, of course, be a company in a sector that is not their main sector. So it's an adjacent field, but there's a lot of cross-fertilization possible. And they form a collaboration and then raise, and they go to Innovate UK for funding. So it's quite a valuable way of both testing new technology combinations and getting funded for it through Innovate. And a bit unusual example, but one of my favorite, is where two members, one from Oxford, MSolve, which is photolithographic business, another company in Bristol, which makes 3D printers, called CEL. They met each other, and after that they formed a joint venture called Q5D to get into a new field completely, using their respective abilities and capacities and manufacturing resources. So that's what do we want to see? We want to see more of that kind of thing. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be as dramatic or exciting as that, but just more interaction leading to actual, not just having a good time and a drink and chat, but we're very keen on results. I don't have a way of capturing them, and I don't care too much. I mean, it's good for marketing, but I'm not intrusive on what's going on among our community particularly, so I don't hear lots and lots of things probably. But the important thing is to know that people are getting value in that respect, and I believe they are. And if you're interested, then get in touch, please. We've got the website there, myself, and very happy to talk more about what we do. So thank you very much, Alistair, for giving me the chance to say that, and to Abby.
No problem. Many thanks, Alex. And just to reiterate Alex's words there, I'd encourage you to follow up and find out more about society and how it can perhaps support you in your endeavours. We have run over time today, but I thought we were a little bit quieter in questions, and I thought it was much more important to hear from our three excellent speakers today. So it's going to be a very curtailed Q&A. I'm going to suggest actually just a single question, so apologies at home if you were expecting more than that. But there was a question that came out, it was directed at you, Roland, in particular, but others may have a comment on this. And it's around the inherent balance of I guess networking by its nature. There is a degree of chance and serendipity involved in that, who you might happen to bump into at an event or anything of that nature. Roland, in your view, how important is it to try, where possible, to be a little bit more systematic about that? And if that is important, how do you go about doing such a thing?
Yeah, so I think this was a question from Nicole Ballantyne, and I think it's a great question. I'm keen to hear her response to this as well, because I think what works for me isn't necessarily what works for other people. But I think it is important to be systematic. You can spend all your life at networking events, and that's not always helpful. So I think it is helpful to be focused on where you're trying to get to, but at the same time, I think you need to leave room for chance conversations and serendipity to happen. So, I mean, some of the things that I do, but again, this is kind of more my job, so this might not be necessarily a good blueprint for other people. But so first of all, when it comes to kind of trends, whether it's films or new technologies, I tend to sort of ignore the first few recommendations that people might make, and I'll wait until I get three or more kind of independent recommendations around a person or an organization or a technology to look at which point I make a mental note of it up until that point, but I only sort of actively act on it until I've had a number of kind of independent kind of recommendations. So that just helps me filter a little bit of the signal from the noise. I also quite a few people get in touch with me, and I ignore all of those kind of cheesy blanket kind of LinkedIn messages where people just want to have a chat, but it's not tailored in any way. But if people have made an effort to maybe have a look at some of the stuff I'm involved with, genuinely seem to be showing an interest and want to find out a bit more, and maybe have a specific question or maybe just want to ask a bit more about it, I make time, even if it's only for 20 minutes, half an hour, but to follow up with all of those things. I always learn something from that. And so I get a lot of value from that, but it does take up quite a lot of time. So that might not be necessarily best advice for everyone on this call, but that's kind of what I do. And something I've been trying to encourage myself to be a bit braver at recently is just to get in touch with people that I find inspiring and interesting. And so far I've got a pretty good success rate. I've been doing a podcast and increasingly plucking up the courage to ask bigger and bigger names to come and speak to me on the podcast. And that's proving to be really, really interesting. So yeah, I try and be systematic, but try and leave room for kind of serendipity as well. But I'm interested in other people's methods there too.
Okay, Alex or Danny, you get, I'm going to add just a 10, 15 seconds worth on that.
Sorry, I was going to let Alex jump in on that one, but as he...
You go for it, Danny.
I was just going to say I don't really have a lot to add to what Roland said. I think that I pretty much completely agree with his take on it. So
we've broken out in broad agreement here, I think. Alex, are you going to say anything controversial, or are you in complete agreement as well?
Oh no, nothing controversial. That's I have to be very careful running societies. Politics can't be discussed almost, but I do agree. I heard the last bit to get. I think blogs, podcasts are a brilliant idea. Get important people if you can. and build your, I think influence is one of the great things when you're over a certain number of people in your network, to try and change, well, I was going to say change the world. I don't probably want to say that exactly, but make a difference, even a smallish difference. I believe in the zeitgeist. You know, there's a time where things are sort of kind of in a form of agreement and coming together, and we just push that envelope any way we can. So anyone who can, any of us who can do that and help our communities, I think it's very valuable.
Thanks for that, guys, and I appreciate it's a very curtailed Q&A there. But as I say, I think it was important to hear fully from you guys. I'm just about to pass you back to Simon, but just before I do, and I will obviously declare an interest in this, but I think that I would encourage all of you at home to do make the most of your networks, make the most of the associations, the societies, the forums, the working groups that may be involved in your area, both local and national. We're all here as Product Design Scotland and the KTNR to help you in that space. It's a big part of what we do, so please do engage as often as you can. Thank you again to our three speakers, and thank you to you guys at home for tuning in from your own homes. And I'll just now pass back to Simon just to summarise and close. Simon.
Great, thanks very much, Ali. Yeah, no, a really great set of talks there. Sound like a stuck record. I echo and endorse everything that everyone said. I've been what I rather probably hackneyed call myself a professional networker since 2008. I worked for a professional engineering institution for 6 years, then I joined KTN and did a similar thing, and really that value is there in what you do, how you do it. But as Roland has said, nowadays it's so more diverse and wide. You also need to be slightly more circumspect in what you do and how you do it. And as as Nicole has said on the chat there, one of our colleagues, sometimes you get people that will just keep coming back for more, and you sometimes need to learn to say, this is not the right thing anymore. So I'm going to sum up now. If I could get the next slide, Ali, because there's something else I wanted to highlight to people, which is actually an upcoming funding call. So this is around, this is our part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. It's not fully out there, but a bit of a highlight on the plan is to have funding to encourage these digital technologies in manufacturing for supply chain. We'll be running a series of events, as you can see on the slide here, over the few weeks in July, where there will be briefings on a topic area and then a general webinar briefing. So the 14th of July is a general briefing. So that'll be Innovate UK, KTN talking about topic, scope, sort of the terms and conditions, the nitty gritty. And then there'll be some more focused ones looking at sectors, working with sector specific colleagues in KTN and Innovate UK. I think it's also worth mentioning, because one of the questions always asked in these sorts of activities is, where's the money? Just briefly, Innovate UK, some of you may have noticed last week, announced they have postponed the regular quarterly Smart Grant Award programme. That's now going to happen later in the autumn. And instead, next week, they will be announcing a new package of funding under the special COVID emergency funding package that was signed off by Cabinet a few months ago. And this will be giving some information on what's left of the £211 million package of business support. Terms and conditions aren't known yet, but we're hoping to see some rapid calls, very quick turnaround, possibly some de minimis funding, things with lower rates then, if not, of part contribution from companies. So making it easier for companies to get on that ladder without having to match as much money. But we'll just have to wait and see for the terms and conditions, and they should be announced next week. And then the last thing to say, which I think will be the last slide from Ali, is, we have one more. So this series has one more event left. So Abby only has to do this one more time. And Ali has to go on holiday and miss the last one, sadly. So the next one on the 1st of July, Design Thinking and System Principles. Again, we'll have a great selection of speakers. Abby and Kevin will obviously be here helping everyone come along. Please join in. Please join Meeting Mojo again and be able to connect and talk to people from previous events and help build that network going forward. But that's it from me, really. I'm going to pass back to Ali if he has any final words.
No, nothing more from me. Just to thank everyone again for coming along, and I look forward, not personally, but I look forward to having as many of you back next week for the final session. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.